I like to retell history in my own personal style, and if you like my style, subscribe and comment. If there is a topic you would like me to go into and research, please be free and tell me in the comments. But for now, lay in bed, relax or put headphones on, pour some coffee or tea, and let's together explore the rise and fall of great Khans and the legacy of the Mongolian Empire. Imagine a land where survival is not merely a challenge but a way of life. This is the Central Asian steppe, endless, harsh and unforgiving, a place that shapes people with the resilience and fortitude of its own raw landscape. From these vast plains emerged the Mongols, a people whose way of life was forged by the elements themselves. Here, among wild horses and sweeping winds, the Mongols developed a culture that revolved around mobility, endurance, and the mastery of survival skills. Every boy grew up learning to ride, to hunt, and to wield the bow. Every girl, too, was a crucial part of the survival engine, adept in the knowledge and labor that sustained their nomadic lifestyle. This was a culture grounded in the fierce necessity of interdependence, where communities thrived not through wealth or static power, but through movement, adaptability, and kinship. But the Mongols did not merely live in harmony with their surroundings, they were hardened by them. Life on the steppes honed not only physical endurance, but a sharp mental acuity, a keen sense of opportunity, and an instinct for strategy, all qualities that would one day bring the known world to its knees. The steppe-dwelling Mongols were neither wealthy nor politically influential in the traditional sense. Unlike the empires with grand cities, towering monuments, and armies of thousands, the Mongols' strength was unassuming, rooted in their intimate knowledge of the land, their unity, and the rigorous simplicity of their lives. In the year 1162, amid the fierce and unforgiving landscapes of the Mongolian steppes, a boy named Temujin was born. His father, Yesugei, was a chieftain, though not of significant power. Yesugei's lineage did not guarantee safety or prosperity. Rather, it marked Temujin as part of the ceaseless struggles for survival, power, and loyalty that defined life among the steppe tribes. These tribes, constantly at war over resources, blood feuds, and alliances, inhabited a world where shifting allegiances could mean the difference between life and death. It was a brutal environment that demanded a sharp mind and unrelenting strength to endure, and this was the world into which Temujin was thrust. Temujin's first lessons in the merciless nature of tribal politics came with shocking cruelty. When he was only 9 years old, his father was poisoned by the Tatar tribe, who saw Yesugei's ambitions as a threat to their own. With Yesugei's death, Temujin's family was left exposed, vulnerable, and soon enough abandoned by their own clan. In the harsh reality of steppe life, an orphaned family without the protection of a strong clan was a liability, a drain on precious resources. And so, the young Temujin, along with his mother and siblings, found themselves cast out, left to fend for themselves in the wilderness. The years that followed were ones of profound hardship and survival. Temujin learned to hunt, to track, and to evade enemies. He learned the art of silence, of patience, and of strategic thinking. Every experience was a lesson in survival, every hardship a training ground for the resilience and ingenuity that would later define his leadership. But beyond the physical challenges, these early years taught him about loyalty and betrayal in ways few others would understand. He learned that alliances were as fragile as life on the steppe, that promises were often made to be broken, and that loyalty was a rare and precious commodity. Despite these hardships, or perhaps because of them, Temujin's presence grew. Even as a young man, he displayed an unyielding will and a charisma that attracted others to him. People recognized his strength and, more importantly, his sense of fairness, a quality that set him apart from the power-hungry chieftains around him. Temujin's followers were not bound to him by fear or obligation, but by a genuine respect for his character. He gave to those who had nothing, shared food with those who were hungry, and treated the lowest members of his growing group with the same respect as his closest companions. This loyalty was the foundation upon which his future empire would be built. In these years, Temujin's alliances were born not from sheer force, but from strategic generosity and marriages that solidified bonds. His marriage to Berthe was not merely a personal choice, but a calculated move to strengthen his political position. Berthe herself was from a neighbouring tribe, and their union symbolized a bridge between their two clans. She would become one of his staunchest allies, her support unwavering through the trials that would come. Yet, even this marriage brought hardship. Berthe was kidnapped early in their marriage, a blow that would have crushed many. But Temujin, in an early show of his tenacity, rescued her, displaying both his loyalty and his willingness to confront danger for those he loved. Temujin's early years were a crucible of suffering and endurance, moulding him into a leader who understood every shade of loyalty, betrayal, resilience, and fear. He learned that to survive among the tribes of the steppes was not just a matter of skill or strength, but of shrewd alliances and unshakable resolve. These formative years did not just prepare him for leadership. They forged a man who could command loyalty through respect and vision, a man destined to become Genghis Khan. His rise was not the result of birthright, but of sheer will and a strategic mind, traits that would soon turn this abandoned boy of the steppes into one of the most formidable leaders the world had ever seen. The steppes of Central Asia in the late 12th century were a land marked by division, a patchwork of tribes locked in cycles of blood feuds and petty wars, each one striving for survival and dominance. These tribes, the Naiman, Merkit, Tatars, and Kerite among others, fought over territory, resources, and long-standing grievances. Loyalties shifted as swiftly as the winds across the plains, and any alliance was as likely to end in betrayal as in lasting partnership. It was a region ruled not by law but by strength, cunning, and a relentless will to survive. Into this chaos stepped Temujin, a man with an audacious vision, to unite the fractured tribes of the steppes under a single banner. Temujin understood that such a feat would require more than brute force. He was no stranger to the ebb and flow of tribal alliances, having witnessed firsthand the cost of weak loyalties and fleeting allegiances. To forge a true union, he would need to employ every tool at his disposal: diplomacy, marriage, and, when necessary, decisive violence. One of his first and most crucial alliances was with Togrul, the leader of the Kerite tribe, who had once been a close ally of Temujin's father. Through Togrul, Temujin gained not only a powerful ally, but the support of an entire tribe, strengthening his growing coalition and setting the stage for further expansion. Temujin's methods were as varied as the challenges he faced. He pursued marriages as a strategic weapon, aligning himself with powerful families to secure their loyalty and to bind their fortunes to his. Each marriage created a new alliance, a new network of support that extended his influence across the steppe. But where diplomacy failed, Temujin did not hesitate to wield a brutal hand. Clans that resisted his authority faced annihilation, their leaders executed or absorbed, their resources seized to fuel his expanding army. This mix of negotiation and ruthless suppression was essential to his success. The tribes soon realized that to resist Temujin was to risk obliteration, while to ally with him was to share in his growing power. As his following grew, so did his reputation. Temujin became known not only as a formidable warrior, but as a fair and just leader. Unlike many chieftains, he did not grant privileges based on birth or status. In his ranks, loyalty and skill were the only currencies that mattered. He rewarded bravery and loyalty with promotions, recognizing that his warriors would fight all the harder, knowing that their deeds, not their lineage, would earn them honor and respect. This egalitarian approach fostered a fierce devotion among his followers, many of whom would remain loyal to him for life. By elevating men based on their abilities rather than their birth, Temujin cultivated an army that was both efficient and loyal, bound together by mutual respect and a shared purpose. This growing unity among his followers allowed Temujin to execute complex strategies and to trust in their unwavering loyalty. He used psychological tactics, spreading fear among his enemies by massacring those who resisted and sparing those who surrendered. His message was clear: join him, and you would be treated with respect. Defy him, and face merciless destruction. The tribes of the steppes, long accustomed to cycles of revenge and retaliation, saw in Temujin a leader who could offer something rare, a stable future, albeit one ruled by his iron will. By 1206, after years of struggle, battles, and shrewd alliances, Temujin had achieved the unthinkable. The disparate tribes who had once fought each other relentlessly now stood united under his command. In a grand assembly, a Kurultai, he was declared Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. It was a title that transcended mere kingship. It signified his dominion over all the tribes and his ambition to reshape the very nature of life on the steppes. This unification did more than create an empire. It redefined what was possible for the Mongol people, transforming them from scattered clans into a unified force that would soon shake the foundations of the known world. Genghis Khan's unification of the Mongols was more than a consolidation of power. It was a statement of intent. Under his rule, the Mongols were no longer a fragmented people, vulnerable to external threats and internal strife. They were a single, unstoppable entity, bound by loyalty to their leader and a shared destiny. This unity was the birth of the Mongol Empire, a force that would soon expand beyond the steppes to conquer and reshape entire civilizations. The steppe-born boy who had once been abandoned by his clan was now the ruler of a unified people, poised to unleash a power the world had never seen. Once Genghis Khan unified the Mongol tribes, he faced a new challenge: how to govern this vast and diverse coalition. The Mongols, while fierce and loyal in battle, came from varied backgrounds, each with its own customs and laws. To hold such a sprawling empire together, Genghis Khan knew he needed more than force or charisma. He needed a structure, a system of law that would bind his people with a common code, enforcing discipline and loyalty in equal measure. From this need emerged the Yasa, a legal code as pragmatic and adaptable as the man who created it. The Yasa was more than a set of laws. It was the backbone of Mongol society, a unifying force that dictated everything from the rules of war to the treatment of prisoners, theft, and even environmental practices. Loyalty was paramount under the Yasa. Every member of the empire, from the lowest soldier to the highest-ranking generals, was expected to adhere to this code, pledging their loyalty not only to Genghis Khan, but to the empire as a whole. In a society built on trust and cohesion, betrayal was among the gravest offences, punished without mercy to maintain the strength and unity of the Mongol state. Discipline was another core tenet of the Yasa. In a world where survival often hinged on the quick, collective response to threats, the Yasa enforced strict discipline among the ranks. Theft, a common and often tolerated offence in many tribal societies, was harshly punished under the Yasa. Property rights were protected to encourage trust among soldiers and civilians alike. A soldier could leave his belongings unguarded without fear of theft, knowing that the Yasa's laws safeguarded his possessions as part of the broader social fabric. This respect for each other's property created an environment where cooperation and mutual support could flourish, even among people from diverse backgrounds. But the Yasa was not solely focused on internal order. It also outlined a vision for ethical conduct in the world beyond the empire. It set guidelines for the treatment of prisoners, forbidding unnecessary cruelty, and establishing clear rules for handling captives. Even in the ruthless world of steppe warfare, the Yasa advocated for a level of humanity, recognizing that an empire founded on respect for life and order would endure longer and inspire greater loyalty than one rooted solely in fear. This sense of ethical governance extended even to the environment. The Yasa prohibited the unnecessary killing of animals during certain seasons, a measure that preserved resources and reflected the Mongols' respect for the land that sustained them. A key component of the Yasa was its emphasis on merit. Unlike many other societies where birthright determined status and power, Genghis Khan promoted a system where men advanced based on their skills, bravery, and loyalty. This merit-based system was revolutionary, allowing talented individuals from any background to rise through the ranks. It cultivated a fierce loyalty among soldiers who knew their hard work and valor could earn them real recognition. Under Genghis Khan's leadership, warriors who had proven their worth could aspire to positions of command, and this open path to advancement created a unified and motivated army, fiercely dedicated to their leader and to the empire. The combination of the Yasa and this meritocratic system transformed the Mongol military into a disciplined, highly efficient force. In battle, Mongol warriors moved with precision, operating as a single unit capable of executing complex strategies with unerring accuracy. Each soldier understood his place, his role, and his duty, and each trusted in the unity and loyalty of his fellow warriors. This cohesion, grounded in the principles of the Yasa, made the Mongol army a formidable presence on the battlefield. Their loyalty to Genghis Khan was not simply allegiance to a ruler, it was a commitment to a way of life that valued honor, loyalty, and discipline above all else. The Yasa, therefore, did more than maintain order. It redefined what it meant to be Mongol. It codified a shared identity that transcended tribal affiliations and personal ambition, binding people from diverse backgrounds into a single, powerful entity. Under the Yasa, Genghis Khan's empire was not merely a coalition of tribes, but a nation unified by principles of justice, loyalty, and discipline. This foundation allowed the Mongols to expand their empire with unprecedented speed and cohesion, transforming them from steppe nomads into rulers of one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. The legacy of the Yasa endured long after Genghis Khan's death. It established a model of governance that combined strength with ethical principles, a vision of law and order that stabilized the Mongol Empire and supported its rapid expansion. Genghis Khan's leadership did not merely command his people, it inspired them, giving the Mongols a purpose and identity that would fuel their conquests and unify them even in the face of distant foreign lands. Through the Yasa, Genghis Khan laid the groundwork for a legacy that would outlast his empire, influencing the principles of governance and military discipline for generations to come. Let's explore the conquests of Genghis Khan and his politics. 1206–1211. The Mongol military was unlike any the world had ever seen, an unstoppable force honed by generations of survival on the unforgiving steppes, refined into a machine of precision, speed, and psychological mastery under Genghis Khan. To the Mongols, warfare was more than combat. It was an art, a calculated execution of strategy and manipulation, turning fear itself into a weapon as potent as any arrow or sword. Genghis Khan understood that while battles could be won with swords, wars were often won with minds. Through innovative military tactics and shrewd psychological warfare, he forged an empire that struck terror into the hearts of his enemies long before his armies appeared on the horizon. At the heart of Mongol military prowess was their horsemanship. Each Mongol warrior possessed an unparalleled mastery over their horse, able to ride swiftly across rough terrain for days on end, outpacing their enemies and arriving when least expected. The Mongol horses, smaller and hardier than those of other cultures, were integral to their tactics. Each warrior maintained multiple mounts, allowing them to switch horses mid-campaign to maintain speed and stamina. This endurance allowed Mongol forces to travel vast distances quickly, covering up to 80 miles in a day, a feat that left their enemies in awe and disbelief. Such speed meant that no region was too distant for a Mongol raid, and no fortress was ever truly safe. Mongol warriors were also elite archers. From a young age, every Mongol boy learned the art of archery, training to hit targets with deadly accuracy even while riding at full gallop. The compound bow they wielded, crafted from wood, horn, and sinew, had an impressive range and power. It could launch arrows over 500 yards, capable of piercing armor and bringing down enemies from a distance. In battle, this mastery allowed Mongol warriors to maintain a fluid, mobile formation, striking quickly before retreating out of reach. This tactic, known as the Parthian shot, involved turning backward on their horses to fire upon pursuing foes. It became a hallmark of Mongol warfare, leaving their enemies exhausted and exposed, forced to chase a force that struck hard and then vanished into the distance. But the Mongols' brilliance was not merely in their technical skills. It lay in their psychological warfare and strategic cunning. One of Genghis Khan's most terrifying tactics was the feigned retreat. In this maneuver, the Mongols would pretend to flee, luring the enemy into a vulnerable position. Driven by the belief that the Mongols were on the run, their opponents would give chase, only to be led into a carefully laid trap. As the enemy forces spread out in pursuit, the Mongols would turn suddenly, surrounding and annihilating their pursuers. This tactic was used repeatedly to devastating effect, breaking the morale of even the most disciplined armies and turning their overconfidence into a fatal flaw. Beyond battlefield maneuvers, Genghis Khan wielded fear itself as a weapon. His campaigns against the Western Xia and Jin dynasties in China exemplified his commitment to total warfare. For Genghis Khan, a battle was not over until the enemy was utterly defeated, with no chance of regrouping. When he first attacked the Western Xia, he used overwhelming force, sparing no one who resisted and allowing the survivors to carry tales of Mongol might back to their lands. The Jin dynasty would meet a similar fate as Genghis Khan's forces advanced, employing siege tactics they had learned from Chinese and Persian engineers to breach fortress walls that had once seemed invulnerable. By sparing those who surrendered and mercilessly crushing those who defied him, he sent a clear and chilling message. Resistance was futile. This use of psychological warfare reached its zenith in Genghis Khan's campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire in 1219. Originally, Genghis Khan had no quarrel with the Khwarezmians. In fact, he saw them as potential trade partners. But when a Mongol trade caravan was seized and its members executed by a Khwarezmian governor, Genghis Khan's wrath was ignited. He sent envoys to seek justice, but the Khwarezmian Shah not only ignored his request, but killed the Mongol envoys, a grave insult. This act of defiance was met with a retaliation so devastating that it became a cautionary tale for centuries. In his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan divided his army into smaller units, allowing them to strike multiple targets simultaneously. His forces moved through deserts and mountains, covering terrain the Khwarezmians had believed impassable. City by city, the Mongols dismantled the Khwarezmian defences, often employing psychological tactics to weaken morale before the first strike. They sent captured Khwarezmian soldiers ahead to warn of the destruction that awaited any who resisted. Cities that resisted faced annihilation, while those that surrendered were often spared, their leaders allowed to govern under Mongol oversight. This method spread fear faster than the Mongols themselves, often prompting cities to open their gates before the Mongol forces even arrived. Genghis Khan's relentless campaigns created a reputation that often preceded his armies, a force of psychological warfare as potent as any weapon. The stories of his wrath, of the cities that lay smouldering in his wake, travelled ahead of his armies, weakening the resolve of his next adversaries. To the outside world, he was a figure of terror, an unstoppable force whose advance was as certain as it was devastating. But to his own people, he was a leader who exemplified strength, discipline, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect and expand their empire. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongol military became more than just an army. It was a psychological juggernaut, a weapon of fear and awe that destabilized empires long before the first arrow was loosed. His mastery of strategy and psychological warfare enabled him to turn even the mightiest of kingdoms into footnotes in the story of the Mongol Empire's unstoppable rise. Through terror, strategy, and brilliant horsemanship, Genghis Khan transformed the Mongols from a confederation of tribes into a force that reshaped the world. As Genghis Khan's empire stretched across vast territories and diverse cultures, he faced a new challenge: maintaining control over a realm so expansive it spanned mountains, deserts, and rivers, encompassing people from China to Persia and beyond. He knew that sheer force alone could not hold together an empire of such scale and complexity. His success as a ruler would depend not only on the strength of his armies, but on his ability to govern a vast, multicultural population. To accomplish this, Genghis Khan pioneered an administrative system grounded in a delicate balance of centralized authority and localized autonomy, underpinned by a level of tolerance that was revolutionary for its time. One of Genghis Khan's most effective administrative strategies was his practice of leaving local leaders in power if they pledged loyalty to the Mongol Empire. Unlike other conquerors who sought to impose their rule through direct control, Genghis recognized that cooperation was often more sustainable than subjugation. By allowing local rulers to maintain their positions and govern their own people, he avoided unnecessary resistance and rebellion. This strategy created a mutually beneficial relationship. Local leaders retained their influence, while Genghis Khan ensured their allegiance, securing their cooperation through both respect and the underlying threat of Mongol retaliation if they disobeyed. This approach fostered a sense of stability and continuity within conquered regions, giving them a stake in the success of the Mongol Empire rather than casting them as perpetual subjects. Genghis Khan's tolerance extended beyond political structures to encompass the spiritual lives of his subjects. In an era when religious conformity was often enforced with brutal zeal, Genghis Khan's policy of religious tolerance was remarkable. He understood that his empire encompassed a tapestry of beliefs, from Buddhism and Islam to Christianity and indigenous traditions, and that forced religious uniformity would be counterproductive, stirring resentment and undermining the unity he sought to build. Instead, he granted freedom of worship, allowing his subjects to follow their faiths without interference. His pragmatic approach was both shrewd and progressive, acknowledging that religious diversity did not threaten his rule as long as political loyalty was maintained. In practice, this tolerance meant that within the Mongol Empire, people could freely worship according to their own traditions, whether in mosques, temples, or churches. Genghis Khan even went further, incorporating religious leaders and scholars into his administration, valuing their knowledge and influence within their communities. By respecting their beliefs and providing them with protection, he fostered an environment where religious leaders often became allies, contributing to the stability of his rule. This open policy of faith served to strengthen his empire by minimizing internal conflict and unifying diverse populations under the common banner of Mongol supremacy. His tolerance was not limited to religion, but extended to cultural practices and customs as well. Genghis Khan understood that imposing a rigid, centralized culture on conquered peoples would only breed resistance. Instead, he allowed local customs to flourish, encouraging the continuation of native traditions and respecting the autonomy of local communities. For the Mongols, unity did not mean uniformity. They valued loyalty and order, but saw no need to erase the identities of those they conquered. This acceptance of cultural diversity allowed the Mongol Empire to expand without losing its internal cohesion, as each conquered region retained its unique character while contributing to the stability and prosperity of the larger whole. Moreover, Genghis Khan's administrative practices were supported by a sophisticated communication network. The Yam, a postal relay system that stretched across his empire, enabled rapid and reliable communication between distant territories. This network allowed Genghis Khan to keep informed of developments throughout his empire, sending orders and receiving reports with remarkable efficiency. The Yam was a lifeline for Mongol governance, binding the empire together and facilitating both trade and governance. This communication infrastructure not only enhanced control, but also fostered economic growth, as merchants and travelers benefited from the protection and stability it provided. Through his policies of tolerance, autonomy, and efficient administration, Genghis Khan achieved what few conquerors had before him. He built an empire that was as durable as it was vast. His approach created a society where diverse cultures could coexist under a common rule, each contributing to the strength and wealth of the empire. By allowing local leaders to govern, respecting the faiths and customs of his subjects, and maintaining an infrastructure that encouraged trade and communication, Genghis Khan established an empire that thrived not through oppression, but through collaboration and mutual respect. In this way, Genghis Khan demonstrated a level of sophistication in governance that was far ahead of his time. He understood that an empire bound solely by fear would be a fragile one, constantly threatened by rebellion and unrest. Instead, he built an empire rooted in tolerance, autonomy, and a shared sense of purpose, binding diverse peoples with a vision that was both inclusive and powerful. This administrative and philosophical tolerance not only solidified his rule, but also laid the foundations for the Pax Mongolica, an era of unprecedented peace, trade, and cultural exchange that would define the Mongol Empire's lasting legacy. Genghis Khan's legacy did not end with his conquests. Perhaps one of his most profound contributions was his understanding of the power of trade and cultural exchange. He recognized that true strength lay not only in military might, but in the prosperity that comes from economic growth and the shared knowledge between civilizations. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire became the steward of the Silk Road, transforming it from a perilous route riddled with thieves and hazards into a bustling artery of commerce and innovation that connected east and west. Genghis Khan understood the significance of the Silk Road, this ancient network of trade routes that stretched across Asia, linking China, Persia, and eventually Europe. By securing these routes, he could ensure the safe passage of merchants, scholars, and travelers, creating a legacy of wealth and exchange that would outlast the empire's political boundaries. This stability brought not only material goods, but also a fusion of ideas, inventions, and cultural practices that would reshape societies far beyond the borders of the Mongol realm. One of the first steps Genghis Khan took was to provide protection to merchants and travelers, knowing that economic prosperity could only flourish under the umbrella of safety. The Mongol military patrolled the routes, their mere presence deterring bandits and pirates who once preyed on caravans. Under Mongol rule, merchants no longer had to fear the dangers that had once plagued the Silk Road, as Genghis Khan's empire offered both security and swift justice for crimes committed against traders. This unprecedented safety transformed the Silk Road from a fragmented, hazardous network into a unified, thriving channel of commerce. The result was a golden era of trade that saw an extraordinary exchange of goods between East and West. Silks, spices, and ceramics flowed from China, while precious stones, textiles, and crafts moved from Persia and Europe. But the true wealth of the Silk Road lay not just in goods, but in ideas. Scholars and scientists traveled alongside merchants, sharing knowledge in fields such as astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The Mongols themselves, though primarily a warrior people, encouraged this exchange, recognizing the value of the knowledge that flowed into their empire. They absorbed and appreciated advancements, and under Mongol rule, these ideas circulated more freely than ever before. Among the most influential technologies that traveled along these routes were paper and gunpowder. The use of paper, perfected in China, spread westward, revolutionizing record-keeping, literature, and government administration across Persia and into Europe. Similarly, gunpowder, first developed in China, began to make its way toward the West, where it would eventually transform warfare and power dynamics. The Mongol Empire acted as a bridge for these innovations, accelerating the spread of knowledge and catalyzing advancements that would shape the future of both Asia and Europe. Medicine, too, flourished in this environment of exchange. Medical texts and practices from the Islamic world, renowned for their sophistication, reached East Asia, where Chinese and Persian doctors shared and refined their methods. The Mongols encouraged the exchange of medical knowledge, valuing the insights of healers from various cultures. This blend of Eastern and Western medical practices fostered new techniques and remedies, enriching the scientific knowledge of all who came into contact with Mongol lands. Genghis Khan's legacy on the Silk Road did not merely facilitate economic growth. It fostered a cultural symbiosis, a blending of traditions, languages, and art forms. Cities along the route, like Samarkand and Bukhara, became cosmopolitan centers of trade and learning, where cultures intermingled, creating a unique fusion of ideas and customs. The Mongols welcomed foreign artists, scholars, and diplomats into their court, respecting their skills and often incorporating foreign knowledge into their own practices. This openness to diversity and innovation became a hallmark of Mongol governance, one that would influence the character of the empire long after Genghis Khan's death. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, brought an unprecedented era of stability to the Silk Road, allowing for this vibrant interchange of goods and ideas. Under Mongol protection, the road was more than a passageway. It was a channel of cultural enrichment that fostered a new level of global interconnectedness. The Mongols themselves became conduits of knowledge, learning from the societies they conquered and transmitting their wisdom across their vast empire. The cultural exchanges that took place during this period would lay the groundwork for the Renaissance in Europe, a rebirth of science and learning that was, in part, fueled by the ideas and technologies exchanged under Mongol rule. In this way, Genghis Khan's vision extended far beyond warfare. By stabilizing and fostering trade on the Silk Road, he created a legacy that bridged civilizations, bringing cultures together in a way that had never been achieved before. This legacy of exchange transformed the ancient world, leaving a mark on history that was as profound as any battlefield victory. Genghis Khan's influence stretched not only across continents, but across generations, setting the stage for a world where the East and West were no longer isolated but connected in a web of shared knowledge and economic interdependence. The Mongol Empire, through its protection of the Silk Road, became a beacon of cultural and intellectual advancement, one that would resonate long after the empire itself had faded. Genghis Khan was no ordinary ruler. He built the Mongol Empire from humble beginnings, transforming his people from scattered tribes to a force that conquered nearly all of Asia. But for a man who reshaped the world, his death remains shrouded in mystery. Historical accounts are few, and those we have come with a mix of legend, rumour, and whispers. The year was 1227, and Genghis Khan was in the heart of a campaign against the Western Shia dynasty. He was still relentless in his pursuit of power, showing no signs of slowing down despite his age. And then, almost suddenly, he was gone. Some records suggest he fell off his horse during battle, sustaining fatal injuries. Other tales paint a more dramatic picture, hinting that he was fatally wounded by an enemy arrow, an injury that his doctors just couldn't mend. Yet, perhaps the most compelling and oddly poetic theory is that he simply succumbed to illness. The warrior who had conquered empires might have been brought down by something as common as a fever. To Mongol culture, his death was kept as quiet as possible. His empire's momentum had to be preserved, so his followers made it their mission to keep the news under wraps. A curtain of secrecy fell around his burial. They say that to protect the location of his grave, a great number of witnesses were silenced. And to this day, no one knows where he rests. Genghis Khan's death may have come quietly, but his legacy was anything but. His sons and grandsons expanded the empire even further, carrying on his vision and ensuring his name would echo through history. And maybe, just maybe, this mystery is exactly what he would have wanted, to be both feared and elusive, even in death. The reign of Ögedei Khan, 1229 to 1241. Upon Genghis Khan's death, the responsibility of leading the vast Mongol Empire fell to his third son, Ögedei. Though Genghis Khan had many capable sons, he saw in Ögedei a blend of qualities uniquely suited for leadership: a calm, balanced temperament, a keen administrative mind, and a genuine concern for the welfare of the empire. In 1229, after a Kurultai, a grand assembly of Mongol chieftains, Ögedei was formally appointed Great Khan, a decision that would usher in an era of consolidation and administrative advancement. While Genghis Khan had forged the Mongol Empire through conquest, it would be under Ögedei's leadership that the empire would take its shape as a unified, structured state. One of Ögedei's first acts as Great Khan was to establish a capital city that would serve as the heart of the Mongol Empire. He chose Karakorum, a settlement that began as a modest base for military operations, but would soon become the administrative and cultural hub of the empire. Building a capital was a significant step for the Mongols, who had historically been a nomadic people without a permanent center. Karakorum symbolized the evolution of the Mongol Empire from a coalition of tribes to an established state, and it represented Ögedei's commitment to creating a legacy of order and governance. Under Ögedei's direction, Karakorum became a bustling city that reflected the diversity of the empire itself. Craftsmen and artisans from China, Persia, and beyond were invited to Karakorum to build palaces, temples, and marketplaces, transforming the capital into a vibrant center of commerce and culture. The city's architecture was an eclectic mix of styles, showcasing the Mongols' openness to different traditions and their desire to blend the strengths of each culture they encountered. This melting pot of influences made Karakorum a symbol of the Mongol Empire's reach and its capacity for synthesis, blending the knowledge and artistry of conquered peoples into a shared identity under Mongol rule. Ögedei's reign was marked not only by physical infrastructure, but by an ambitious vision for administrative efficiency. One of his most notable achievements was the expansion of the Yam, a postal relay system that would become the empire's lifeline. The Yam was a network of relay stations that stretched across thousands of miles, manned by riders and equipped with fresh horses at regular intervals. This system allowed messengers to travel swiftly across the vast Mongol territories, relaying orders, intelligence, and diplomatic messages with unprecedented speed. The Yam enabled Ogedei to maintain tight control over the farthest reaches of the empire, ensuring that no region was ever truly isolated from the central authority. The Yam was not merely a tool of governance, but a testament to Ogedei's understanding of connectivity. He saw that efficient communication was the glue that would hold the empire together, allowing him to respond to issues as they arose, regardless of distance. The network facilitated not only governance but also trade, as merchants and envoys could travel safely along these routes under the protection of the Mongol Empire. The Yam transformed the Mongol Empire into a cohesive entity where information flowed freely and swiftly between the center and the peripheries, fostering unity in an empire that spanned continents. Ogedei's administrative vision extended beyond infrastructure to policies that encouraged economic growth and stability. He recognized that the prosperity of the empire relied on a steady flow of goods and resources, and he implemented a taxation system that supported both the state and its subjects. Instead of imposing burdensome taxes that could cripple local economies, he favored a system that collected reasonable contributions, allowing conquered regions to thrive while still providing for the empire's needs. His approach to taxation was practical and humane, a reflection of his commitment to a stable, prosperous empire. In addition to taxes, Ogedei introduced a policy of supporting merchants, providing them with official documents that guaranteed their safety and privileges across Mongol territories. This protection made the Mongol Empire a safe haven for traders, encouraging the movement of goods, ideas, and wealth along the Silk Road. By fostering trade, Ogedei not only enriched the empire, but also reinforced its role as a bridge between East and West. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire became a hub of economic activity and cultural exchange, attracting merchants from as far away as Europe and the Middle East. Ogedei's leadership style was marked by a blend of authority and approachability. He valued the opinions of his advisors and generals, often consulting them on matters of state. His ability to listen, combined with his willingness to make decisive choices, earned him the respect and loyalty of his people. Unlike his father, whose leadership was rooted in the force of his personality and his presence on the battlefield, Ogedei governed through structure, policy, and the creation of institutions that would endure. His approach to governance brought a level of stability to the empire that allowed it to flourish, setting the stage for further expansion and consolidation under his successors. While Genghis Khan had been the empire's founder, carving it from the steppes with blood and iron, Ogedei was its builder, turning it into a true state with a capital, a bureaucracy, and a communication network that could rival any in the world. His vision and administrative skills transformed the Mongol Empire from a collection of conquered lands into a unified whole, creating an empire that could function as a single, interconnected entity. The structures he established and the policies he implemented strengthened the empire and ensured that his father's conquests would not merely dissolve into chaos. In Ogedei, the Mongol Empire found a leader who could consolidate the legacy of Genghis Khan and lay the foundations for a sustainable empire. Through his administrative innovations and commitment to infrastructure, Ogedei brought order to an empire that spanned from the Pacific Ocean to the edge of Europe. His legacy was one of cohesion, connectivity, and pragmatism, an enduring framework that would support the Mongol Empire as it continued to shape the course of history. Under Ogedei Khan's leadership, the Mongol Empire extended its influence far beyond the plains of Asia, pushing the boundaries of its domain into the heart of Europe. This Western campaign, one of the most ambitious in Mongol history, showcased the empire's unmatched military prowess, tactical innovation, and adaptability in facing unfamiliar terrain and foes. Ogedei entrusted this critical mission to two of his most brilliant and seasoned generals, Subutai, a tactical genius and master of strategic warfare, and Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, and a leader as fierce as he was skilled. Together they embarked on a campaign that would send shockwaves through Russia, Poland, and Hungary, reshaping European perceptions of warfare and power. The Mongol advance into Europe began with the conquest of the Russian principalities, a series of fragmented kingdoms weakened by internal strife and unprepared for the Mongol onslaught. Subutai and Batu Khan employed the same ruthless efficiency and psychological tactics that had brought success in Asia. The Mongols used reconnaissance and intelligence networks to understand the weaknesses of each principality, striking with precision and moving swiftly to prevent alliances from forming. Russian forces, accustomed to defending against raids rather than full-scale invasions, were unprepared for the Mongols' relentless advance. City after city fell, and by the winter of 1237 to 1238, the Mongols had devastated the Russian heartland, leaving a trail of destruction that broke the will of many of Russia's most powerful leaders. One of the most significant aspects of the Mongol strategy in Europe was their adaptability to the unique challenges of the region. The cold Russian winters, dense forests, and fortified cities posed difficulties, yet the Mongols adjusted their tactics to overcome them. Unlike their European adversaries, who were bound by traditional methods of siege warfare, the Mongols employed a flexible approach, combining siege engines with psychological warfare to break their opponent's resolve. They forced captured soldiers and civilians to dig trenches or operate siege machines, conserving Mongol resources and demoralizing defenders. Through these relentless tactics, they subdued Russia and established a base from which they would launch the next stage of their European campaign. After consolidating their hold over the Russian territories, Subutai and Batu turned their gaze toward the rest of Eastern Europe. In 1241, they launched a simultaneous, coordinated invasion of Poland and Hungary, a maneuver that demonstrated the Mongols' sophisticated approach to multi-front warfare. This campaign was meticulously planned, with each army operating independently, yet aligned in strategy, striking terror into the hearts of the European kingdoms. The Mongol forces moved with precision, capitalizing on their superior speed and mobility to outmaneuver their adversaries at every turn. In Poland, the Mongols achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Liegnitz in April 1241. Facing a coalition of Polish, German, and Moravian forces led by Duke Henry II, the Mongols employed their trademark feigned retreat, drawing the Europeans into disarray before surrounding and annihilating them. This tactic, honed over decades of warfare, exploited the European knights' tendency to charge headlong into battle, leaving them vulnerable to Mongol archers and encirclement. The aftermath of the battle was devastating. Duke Henry II was killed, his forces shattered, and the Mongols left a gruesome display of severed ears from fallen soldiers to send a message of fear and dominance. While the Polish forces reeled from the shock of Liegnitz, Subutai and Batu pressed forward into Hungary, where they faced King Bela IV's army near the Sajo River in what would become known as the Battle of Mohi. Here the Mongols showcased their ability to adapt to new tactics and environments, using a coordinated night assault to cross the river and surprise the Hungarian forces. In a masterful display of strategic planning, the Mongols encircled the Hungarian camp, trapping their enemies with no escape. The Hungarian army, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, was decimated. The Battle of Mohi served as a brutal reminder of the Mongols' tactical supremacy and their capacity to inflict catastrophic losses on numerically superior foes. The campaigns in Poland and Hungary sent shockwaves across Europe, forever altering European military doctrine and shaping the continent's perception of the Mongol threat. The devastation wrought by the Mongols shattered any illusions of security that European leaders might have held. For the first time, kingdoms and empires that had considered themselves distant from the turmoil of Asia now found themselves directly threatened by the same forces that had conquered the vast lands stretching from the Pacific to the Volga. The Mongols' expansion into Europe demonstrated their unparalleled ability to adapt to unfamiliar environments and opponents. Subutai and Batu showed that Mongol tactics were not confined to the open steppes. They could be applied, and even modified, to conquer fortified cities, cross rivers, and overcome the rigid battle formations of European knights. This adaptability was a hallmark of Mongol warfare and one of the reasons their campaigns were so successful. They combined flexibility with discipline, utilizing a blend of mobility, surprise, and psychological warfare to break even the most disciplined of armies. While the death of Ögedei Khan in 1241 halted further Mongol expansion into Europe, the impact of these campaigns was profound. The Mongol incursions served as a wake-up call for European leaders, many of whom began to re-evaluate their military structures and strategies in light of the Mongol threat. Fear of the Mongols permeated European society, and stories of their ruthless tactics and near-supernatural prowess spread quickly, fostering a sense of dread that would linger for generations. The Mongol expansion into Europe was more than a series of military victories. It was a display of a new kind of warfare that shattered traditional notions of combat and power. Subutai and Batu's campaigns illustrated the strategic genius of the Mongol military system, a force that could outthink, outmaneuver, and overwhelm even the most prepared adversaries. While their westward march ultimately ended with the halt of the European campaigns, the Mongols left an indelible mark on European military thought, forever altering the course of history. Their campaign served as both a testament to Mongol might and a reminder of the ever-expanding reach of an empire that had been born on the distant steppes of Asia, yet cast its shadow across the world. Ogedei Khan, inheriting his father's vision of an expansive and stable empire, understood that the Mongol Empire's longevity would depend not only on the strength of its armies, but on effective governance and sustainable administration. While Genghis Khan had laid the foundation of the empire through conquest, Ogedei recognized that managing such a vast and diverse territory required a structured, systematic approach that would allow the empire to thrive. Under Ogedei's rule, domestic reforms became a cornerstone of Mongol administration, fostering unity among a multicultural populace and building an empire that was as efficient in governance as it was powerful in war. One of Ogedei's most significant contributions to the empire was his taxation reform. In an era when many empires relied on heavy tributes and exploitative taxes that bled conquered regions dry, Ogedei adopted a more pragmatic approach. He established a fair and systematic tax policy, one that allowed conquered regions to contribute to the empire's needs without destroying their own economic foundations. His tax system took into account the economic status of each region, ensuring that wealthier areas contributed more, while poorer communities were not overburdened. This balanced approach allowed conquered peoples to support the empire, while maintaining a degree of economic stability that benefited both local communities and the Mongol administration. The revenue generated from this taxation system was then reinvested into the empire, funding infrastructure projects that would facilitate communication, trade, and governance across Mongol territories. Roads were built and maintained, ensuring that goods and information could flow smoothly from one end of the empire to the other. The yam, the postal relay system expanded under Ogedei, was funded by these taxes, creating a reliable communication network that linked distant regions with the imperial capital at Karakorum. This infrastructure was not only a means of control but a bridge between diverse regions, allowing Ogedei to govern effectively over the empire's vast and varied lands. Beyond taxes and infrastructure, Ogedei implemented administrative reforms that respected the unique characteristics of the empire's multicultural populace. He recognized that unity in diversity was essential for stability, and his policies reflected a profound tolerance toward the various cultures, religions, and social structures within the empire. This tolerance extended to the religious practices of his subjects, a policy that was revolutionary in an era when many empires sought to impose a single religious identity. Instead of enforcing Mongol customs or beliefs, Ogedei allowed religious communities to practice freely, supporting their rights and even providing protections for their places of worship. This freedom was extended to Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, and others, each of whom found a place within the Mongol Empire's vast tapestry. By allowing religious communities to thrive, Ogedei gained the trust and loyalty of his subjects, creating a sense of inclusivity that strengthened the empire. This religious tolerance was not merely a matter of policy, it was embedded in the fabric of Mongol governance. Ogedei invited religious leaders to Karakorum, where they shared their beliefs, engaged in dialogues, and contributed to the intellectual diversity of the Mongol court. This inclusiveness fostered an environment where religious leaders often became allies to the state, promoting peace and cooperation within their communities and contributing to the empire's stability. Ogedai's pragmatic governance extended to the empire's social and economic administration. He recognized that a strong and stable empire required a well-organized bureaucracy capable of managing the complexities of a territory that spanned continents. To achieve this, he recruited administrators from various cultures, including Chinese, Persian, and Arab officials, whose expertise in governance and record-keeping enriched Mongol administration. These officials were responsible for managing local affairs, collecting taxes, and ensuring that the Mongol government functioned smoothly at every level. By incorporating skilled individuals from different cultures, Ogedai not only strengthened his administration, but also fostered a sense of shared purpose among his subjects. Ogedai's policies were grounded in a vision of governance that went beyond mere control. He sought to create an empire that was resilient and sustainable, one where conquered peoples were not simply subjugated, but integrated into a system that allowed them to contribute actively to the empire's success. His administrative reforms created a balance between central authority and local autonomy, allowing regional leaders to govern their communities in accordance with local customs as long as they remained loyal to the Mongol state. This decentralized approach minimized resistance and rebellion, as local populations retained a degree of self-governance, while also ensuring that Ogedai's rule remained effective across vast distances. Under Ogedai, the Mongol Empire became more than a military juggernaut. It evolved into a sophisticated, multicultural state where people of different backgrounds could live, work, and worship in relative harmony. His governance created an empire that was unified not through force alone, but through shared economic interests, mutual respect, and a commitment to stability. This inclusivity allowed the Mongols to maintain control over a realm that, under different circumstances, might have fragmented into warring factions. Ogedai's reforms transformed the empire from a loose collection of conquered territories into a cohesive state, one capable of managing its diverse population with efficiency and tolerance. Ogedai's legacy as a ruler extended far beyond his military conquests. Through his domestic reforms, he laid the groundwork for a governance system that would support the Mongol Empire's stability for decades. His taxation policies, administrative inclusivity, and religious tolerance enabled a sustainable model of empire, one that did not simply conquer, but integrated and uplifted. His policies reflected the Mongol ethos of pragmatism and adaptability, recognizing that the true strength of an empire lay not in its ability to subjugate, but in its capacity to unify. Under Ogedai's leadership, the Mongol Empire became not only an enduring force, but a unique civilization, one that bridged cultures and set a new standard for governance in a multicultural world. Ogedai's death in December 1241, reportedly due to excessive drinking, occurred at a critical juncture. At that time, Mongol armies were advancing into Central Europe, posing a significant threat to European kingdoms. The news of his death prompted the Mongol commanders to halt their campaigns and return to Mongolia for the Kurultai, the traditional assembly to elect a new Great Khan. This withdrawal spared Europe from further Mongol invasions at that time. The power vacuum left by Ogedai's death led to a period of political instability within the Mongol Empire. His widow, Turagin Khatun, assumed the role of regent and worked to secure the succession for her son, Güyük Khan. Güyük Khan's brief reign and internal struggles, 1246 to 1248. When Güyük Khan ascended to the throne in 1246, he inherited an empire that spanned continents, united under his grandfather Genghis Khan, and strengthened through the reforms of his father, Ogedai. But with this vast dominion came a complex web of loyalties and rivalries, cultural tensions and competing ambitions. Güyük's rule would prove short and tumultuous, overshadowed by internal discord and political infighting, particularly among the empire's nobility. His brief tenure revealed the cracks in the Mongol Empire's foundations as long-standing rivalries began to surface, challenging the unity that had once fueled their conquests. One of the most pressing challenges Güyük faced was the tension between the Chagatai and Jochid factions, two powerful branches of the Mongol royal family with distinct interests and loyalties. The Chagatai Khanate, led by descendants of Genghis Khan's second son, Chagatai, was a fiercely traditional faction, committed to preserving the nomadic lifestyle and customs that had defined Mongol identity. In contrast, the Jochid branch, descended from Genghis Khan's eldest son, Jochi, held vast territories to the west, including the Golden Horde, where they had begun to integrate more deeply with the cultures and political practices of the sedentary societies they ruled. These differences went beyond mere lifestyle. They represented two competing visions for the future of the Mongol Empire. The Chagatai faction viewed the Jochids with suspicion, seeing their increasing assimilation with sedentary societies as a threat to traditional Mongol values. Meanwhile, the Jochids sought greater autonomy and influence over their territories, advocating for a more decentralized structure that would allow each region to govern in alignment with its unique cultural landscape. This ideological clash created a rift that would come to define Gyuk's reign, complicating his efforts to maintain a cohesive empire. Adding to these factional tensions were Gyuk's strained relationships within the royal family itself. Gyuk's rise to power had not been smooth. He was known to be a forceful, even abrasive figure, quick to assert his authority and slow to compromise. This created friction among the Mongol nobility, particularly with his cousin Batu, the ruler of the Golden Horde. Batu, who had led successful campaigns into Europe, was a powerful figure in his own right, commanding the loyalty of many Mongol and allied forces. Batu had initially refused to recognize Gyuk's claim to the throne, leading to a bitter rivalry that simmered throughout Gyuk's rule. Their animosity ran so deep that Gyuk eventually prepared to march west to confront Batu directly, a move that might have led to civil war had Gyuk not died unexpectedly in 1248. This rivalry underscored a growing problem within the Mongol Empire. The decentralized nature of Mongol governance, which had once been a source of strength, was now becoming a liability. Each Khanate operated with significant autonomy, and while loyalty to the Great Khan was nominally paramount, regional leaders like Batu wielded substantial power in their own right. As Gyuk tried to assert central control, he encountered resistance from these powerful Khans, each with their own ambitions and interests. His efforts to consolidate authority only intensified existing grievances, deepening the divides within the empire. Gyuk's ascension also highlighted the complexities of ruling a culturally diverse empire. The Mongol Empire encompassed a vast array of peoples, languages, and religions. From the steppe tribes to the Persian heartlands, the Islamic territories, and the Eastern European principalities. While Genghis Khan and Ögedei had largely managed this diversity through tolerance and pragmatism, Gyuk's rule was marked by a lack of the same diplomatic finesse. He struggled to balance the competing demands of different regions, each with its own unique identity and priorities. His attempt to enforce stricter central control sometimes alienated his subjects, who had grown accustomed to a degree of autonomy in their local governance. Religious diversity, too, played a role in the tensions of Gyuk's rule. The empire was home to Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, and followers of traditional Mongol shamanism. Gyuk's support for Nestorian Christianity, which his mother, Töregin, had embraced, created resentment among the empire's other religious communities. Although Genghis Khan had fostered religious tolerance as a cornerstone of Mongol rule, Gyuk's perceived favoritism risked undermining this tradition, further straining the unity of his empire. Perhaps most significantly, Gyuk's reign revealed the challenges inherent in ruling an empire through a decentralized, family-based structure. The Great Khan's authority depended not only on his own power, but also on the cooperation and loyalty of the various Khanates, each governed by descendants of Genghis Khan's sons. While this arrangement had initially strengthened the Mongol state by distributing power among trusted family members, it also sowed the seeds of future conflict. As each faction grew in power, so did their ambition, and the lack of a clear centralized structure for resolving disputes left the empire vulnerable to factionalism and rivalry. Ultimately, Gyuk's rule exposed the fragility of Mongol unity. His short reign, marked by internal discord and unresolved rivalries, underscored the difficulties of managing an empire that was both vast in territory and diverse in its people. Although Gyuk himself was a competent and determined leader, his inability to overcome the internal challenges that plagued his rule revealed the limitations of the Mongol Empire's political structure. His death in 1248 left the empire at a crossroads, with the tensions and divisions that had defined his reign lingering, waiting for the next leader to either mend or exploit. In this way, Guyuk's reign serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges of empire. His struggles with internal politics and the delicate balance of power among the Mongol nobility highlighted the inherent difficulties in ruling a realm as diverse and far-reaching as the Mongol Empire. The unity that had fueled the empire's expansion was beginning to fray as ambitions, rivalries, and cultural differences tested the limits of Mongol governance. His brief tenure marked the beginning of an era where the Mongol Empire would increasingly grapple with the question of whether its unity could be preserved or whether it would inevitably fragment under the weight of its own vastness. During his brief and turbulent reign, Guyuk Khan faced both the allure of continued expansion and the growing need for diplomacy. His ambitions to extend Mongol influence were tempered by the internal challenges that plagued his rule. Yet, even as these internal conflicts slowed his expansion, Guyuk turned his gaze westward, recognizing that the empire's future might lie not solely in conquest, but in alliances and diplomacy with the powers of Europe. One of the most intriguing episodes of Guyuk's reign was his correspondence with Pope Innocent IV, a diplomatic effort that reflected both the complexity of the Mongol Empire's global position and Guyuk's nuanced approach to foreign relations. By the mid-13th century, the Mongols had become a force that Europe could no longer ignore. Their devastating campaigns had already reached Eastern Europe, and European leaders were keenly aware of the Mongol threat. At the same time, Europe faced its own internal conflicts and external pressures, particularly from the Islamic states of the Middle East. Pope Innocent IV, concerned about the Muslim powers to the south and east, saw an opportunity in the Mongols, a potential ally who could aid in curbing Islamic influence. In 1245, Pope Innocent IV sent an emissary, Giovanni de Pian del Carpine, to the Mongol court with a letter addressed to the Great Khan. The letter was cautious but direct, urging the Mongols to cease their invasions and expressing a desire for peaceful relations. Innocent IV also extended an invitation for the Mongols to embrace Christianity, framing the relationship as one of mutual benefit in facing shared enemies. This marked one of the earliest diplomatic missions from Europe to the Mongol Empire, a cautious yet ambitious attempt to establish communication and seek alignment with a power that had, until then, been seen primarily as a terrifying and destructive force. Guyuk's response was less than conciliatory. Though he received Carpine with the respect due to an emissary, his reply to Pope Innocent IV was a firm assertion of Mongol supremacy. Guyuk's letter demanded that the Pope and European rulers acknowledge the authority of the Mongol Empire, making it clear that the Mongols did not view themselves as potential allies under European influence, but as the supreme power to which others should submit. He dismissed the idea of converting to Christianity, asserting the Mongols' independence in matters of faith and governance. To Guyuk, the notion of an alliance on equal terms was irrelevant. He saw the Mongol Empire as the dominant force and expected other leaders, including those in Europe, to recognize this reality. Despite the assertive tone of his response, Guyuk's engagement with Europe marked a significant shift in Mongol foreign policy. While Genghis Khan and Ogedei had primarily focused on conquest and expansion, Guyuk's correspondence with the Pope reflected an awareness of the Mongol Empire's role within a broader global context. He recognized that diplomacy could serve as a tool for influence, one that could complement military might in extending Mongol authority. Guyuk's openness to communication, even if he did not yield to European demands, showed that the Mongols were not merely conquerors, but were beginning to see themselves as a central power in a world increasingly interconnected by trade, religion, and politics. However, Guyuk's ambitions for further expansion were ultimately hindered by the internal divisions that plagued his rule. The rivalries within the Mongol royal family, particularly the ongoing tension with Batu Khan of the Golden Horde, consumed much of Guyuk's attention and resources. His relationship with Batu was so strained that it threatened to ignite a civil war. Guyuk even prepared to march westward to confront Batu directly, a move that could have torn the empire apart. This constant state of internal conflict left little room for the grand military campaigns that had defined his predecessor's reigns, forcing Guyuk to adopt a more cautious and inward-focused approach to leadership. The political infighting and factionalism within the Mongol nobility not only limited Guyuk's military ambitions, but also constrained his ability to project Mongol power diplomatically. His authority was undermined by the fact that he could not command the full loyalty of the empire's leaders, who each held considerable power over their own territories. The empire's decentralized structure, once a source of strength, now became a barrier to unified action. Guyuk's struggles to assert control over his own realm highlighted the challenges of ruling an empire as vast and diverse as the Mongol Empire, where each faction had its own ambitions and loyalties. In 1248, while en route to confront Batu Khan, Guyuk died under circumstances that remain a subject of historical debate. Some sources suggest he succumbed to natural causes, possibly exacerbated by his health conditions, while others imply the possibility of foul play. His death averted a potential major conflict within the empire and led to a period of political instability. Guyuk's sudden death cut short any plans he might have had to resolve these issues or to pursue his diplomatic overtures further. His unexpected passing left the empire without a clear line of succession, plunging it into a period of uncertainty. The empire was at a critical juncture, lacking strong leadership and cohesion, with rival factions poised to exploit the power vacuum. The absence of Guyuk's central authority further destabilized the empire, intensifying the political divisions that had marred his reign. Guyuk's brief foray into European diplomacy was an early indication of the Mongol Empire's evolving relationship with the rest of the world, a shift from relentless conquest to a more complex engagement that included diplomacy and strategic alliances. His correspondence with Pope Innocent IV, though unsuccessful in forming an alliance, marked a pivotal moment when the Mongols began to explore their position in the global order. Guyuk's rule, while limited in its accomplishments, reflected the growing awareness within the Mongol leadership that diplomacy, in conjunction with military might, could be a means to assert influence on the world stage. In the end, Guyuk's reign was a paradox, marked by ambitious outreach and constrained by internal strife. His efforts to engage with Europe hinted at the Mongol Empire's potential as a diplomatic force, yet his inability to overcome the internal conflicts that plagued his rule limited his achievements. Guyuk's reign serves as a reminder of the dual forces of ambition and discord within the Mongol Empire, highlighting both the potential and the fragility of a realm that stood at the crossroads of conquest and diplomacy. Menki Khan's stabilization and expansion, 1251 to 1259. Menki Khan's rise to power marked a critical turning point in the Mongol Empire's history. Following years of political discord and internal rivalry, Menki's ascension was a deliberate choice aimed at stabilizing the empire and restoring unity. His selection as Great Khan came after a tense and contentious Kurultai, or council, where rival factions within the Mongol nobility vied for influence and control. The council, held in 1251, was a pivotal moment that underscored the need for strong leadership to prevent the empire from fracturing under the weight of internal disputes. Menki emerged as a unifying figure, one who commanded respect from various factions and possessed both the administrative skill and the military vision to steer the Mongol Empire back toward a path of expansion. Menki's consolidation of power was not merely a matter of political maneuvering. It involved a systematic effort to curb the influence of rival factions and centralize authority within the empire. One of his first actions was to solidify his hold by purging opponents who had resisted his rise. These included members of rival branches of the royal family, such as the descendants of Ogedai and Chagatai, who had traditionally held significant power within the Mongol hierarchy. By removing these potential threats, Menki strengthened the unity of his rule and laid the groundwork for a centralized administration that would allow him to direct the empire's energies outward. Menki's reign was marked by a renewed focus on expansion, particularly in regions that had long eluded full Mongol control. While previous Khans had established Mongol dominance in vast swaths of Asia, the Middle East remained a region of interest, both for its wealth and its strategic importance. Möngke saw an opportunity to extend Mongol influence further into the Islamic world, a region that had thus far resisted total subjugation. He entrusted his brother Hulagu with this ambitious campaign, aiming to conquer the Abbasid Caliphate, a symbol of Islamic power centered in Baghdad, and establish Mongol supremacy over the Middle East. In 1258, Hulagu led a powerful Mongol force into the heart of the Islamic world, besieging the city of Baghdad, which had been the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate for centuries. The campaign was meticulously planned, with Hulagu's forces bolstered by Persian, Christian, and other regional allies who saw an opportunity in aligning with the Mongols. The siege of Baghdad was brutal and relentless. Hulagu deployed advanced siege weapons, including catapults and battering rams, learned from the Chinese and perfected by the Mongols through years of warfare. When the city fell, it marked a devastating blow to the Islamic world. The Mongols sacked Baghdad, bringing an end to the Abbasid Caliphate and laying waste to a city that had been a beacon of culture, science, and learning in the Islamic Golden Age. The fall of Baghdad was more than a military victory. It was a symbolic conquest that demonstrated Mongol power and struck fear throughout the Middle East. The Abbasid Caliphate had long been a spiritual center for the Muslim world, and its collapse under Mongol hands shattered the notion of Islamic invulnerability. This conquest established Mongol dominance over a region that was not only strategically valuable, but also culturally significant. The Mongols, who often allowed local leaders and customs to remain intact, showed little mercy here, reinforcing their reputation as both conquerors and disruptors. Baghdad's libraries, monuments, and intellectual heritage suffered heavily, and the destruction was a blow from which the city and the broader Islamic world would struggle to recover for centuries. Möngke's ambitions, however, were not without limits. Although the Mongols had established dominance in Persia and Iraq, their expansion into the deeper Islamic territories met with resistance. Hulagu's forces encountered the Mamluks in Egypt, a formidable military power known for their discipline and skill in mounted combat. The Mamluks, a dynasty of former slave soldiers, had risen to power in Cairo and were determined to prevent the Mongols from advancing into their territory. In 1260, at the Battle of Ain Jalut, the Mamluks achieved a decisive victory over the Mongols. This battle marked the first significant defeat for Mongol forces in open combat and highlighted the resilience and strategic capability of the Mamluks, who managed to halt Mongol expansion into North Africa. The defeat at Ain Jalut was a turning point, not only for the Mongols but also for the broader region. It demonstrated that the Mongols, though formidable, were not invincible, and it inspired resistance among other states that feared Mongol conquest. The Mamluks' victory preserved Egypt and much of North Africa from Mongol rule, drawing a boundary to the empire's western expansion. This clash between the Mongols and the Mamluks established a legacy of tension between the two powers and reinforced the importance of disciplined military strategy and local resistance in curbing Mongol ambitions. Beyond the military campaigns, Möngke's reign also reinforced the Mongol Empire's administrative and cultural integration efforts. Möngke recognized that ruling such a vast empire required a delicate balance of authority and tolerance. While he centralized power to strengthen his rule, he also allowed local leaders to maintain influence, provided they acknowledged Mongol supremacy. This approach enabled him to maintain control over diverse populations, from the Buddhist regions of East Asia to the Islamic territories in the West. He upheld the Mongol tradition of religious tolerance, permitting his subjects to worship freely, which fostered stability and minimized resistance within the empire. Möngke's reign ultimately solidified the Mongol Empire's legacy as both conquerors and administrators. Under his rule, the empire reached its zenith in terms of geographic extent, stretching from the shores of the Pacific to the borders of the Mediterranean. His campaigns in the Middle East, particularly the fall of Baghdad, left a lasting impact on the Islamic world, forever altering the political and cultural landscape of the region. Yet, his empire was defined not only by its conquests, but by the sophisticated governance that Möngke promoted. a blend of central authority and local autonomy that allowed the empire to maintain unity across a vast and culturally diverse territory. In 1259, while leading a military campaign against the Song dynasty in China, Monkey died during the siege of Diaoyucheng in Sichuan. The exact cause of his death remains uncertain, with some accounts suggesting illness, possibly cholera or dysentery, while others indicate he may have died from injuries sustained in battle. His death led to the withdrawal of Mongol forces from the campaign and precipitated a succession crisis within the empire. Monkey's death in 1259 left the Mongol Empire at a crossroads. While his campaigns had extended its reach, his absence ignited a power struggle that would challenge the stability he had worked to achieve. The absence of a designated successor led to a power struggle between his brothers, Kublai and Arik Bök, culminating in the Toluid Civil War, 1260 to 1264. This internal conflict weakened the unity of the empire and contributed to its eventual fragmentation into distinct khanates. Nevertheless, Monkey's reign marked a high point in Mongol history, a period of both expansion and consolidation that underscored the empire's unparalleled ability to blend military might with pragmatic governance. His legacy, carved through both conquest and diplomacy, would shape the Mongol Empire's influence in the world long after his passing, leaving an indelible mark on the Middle East and solidifying the Mongols' place as a dominant force in medieval history. Monkey Khan's reign was marked not only by military expansion, but by a strategic vision for economic stability and administrative efficiency. Recognizing that a vast and diverse empire required more than military might to sustain itself, Monkey implemented comprehensive reforms aimed at strengthening the Mongol Empire's economic foundations and streamlining its governance. His economic and administrative policies provided a structured framework that facilitated trade, increased revenues, and reinforced the empire's ability to govern effectively across its vast territories. One of Monkey's primary objectives was to create a standardized tax system that would increase the empire's revenues while fostering stability among its diverse populations. The Mongol Empire spanned numerous regions with distinct economic structures and resources, from the agrarian societies in China to the bustling trade centers in Persia and Central Asia. Monkey understood that a rigid, one-size-fits-all tax system would be impractical for such a heterogeneous empire. Instead, he designed a flexible taxation model tailored to the economic realities of each region, allowing local administrators to assess taxes in a way that would be sustainable and fair. To achieve this, Monkey implemented a census across the empire to better understand the demographics and resources of each territory. The census was a monumental administrative undertaking, gathering detailed information on populations, land, resources, and economic activities. This data enabled Mongol officials to levy taxes proportionally, ensuring that each region contributed to the empire's coffers without straining its economy. The census allowed Monkey to maintain a delicate balance. Each province supported the empire, but none were overburdened to the point of resentment or rebellion. Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty in China, 1260 to 1294. Kublai Khan's ascent to power marked a pivotal moment in Mongol history, one that would fundamentally reshape the empire and set the stage for a new era. Unlike his predecessors, Kublai had a vision that extended beyond traditional Mongol conquests. He was drawn to the allure of China's sophisticated culture, bureaucratic systems, and immense resources, seeing in it the potential for a lasting legacy. However, Kublai's rise was marred by a bitter power struggle with his brother, Arik Bök, which would eventually fracture the Mongol Empire, leading to its division into distinct khanates. This split not only reflected differing visions for the empire's future, but also highlighted the cultural and political challenges of ruling such a vast, diverse realm. The conflict between Kublai and Arik Bök began shortly after the death of their elder brother Monkey Khan in 1259. Monkey's death left a vacuum at the center of Mongol power, and without a clear successor, a struggle ensued. Kublai and Arik Bök, both grandsons of Genghis Khan, represented contrasting visions for the empire's future. Kublai had spent significant time in northern China, where he had been exposed to the complexities of Chinese governance and administration. He saw the value in adopting Chinese bureaucratic practices, believing that a centralized and organized administration was essential to ruling such a densely populated and culturally rich region. Arik Bök, on the other hand, represented the more traditional, nomadic Mongol values. Based in the Mongolian heartland, he was committed to preserving the customs and lifestyles of the steppe, resisting the influence of sedentary civilizations. This ideological divide led to open conflict. In 1260, both Kublai and Arik Böke declared themselves Great Khan in competing Kurultais, a rare and dangerous occurrence that threatened to split the empire. What followed was a civil war, a deeply disruptive conflict that forced Mongol nobles and generals to choose sides, dividing the empire against itself. Kublai's forces were concentrated in the east, drawing support from the territories he had governed in China, while Arik Bök commanded loyalty from the Mongolian heartland and parts of Central Asia. The war dragged on for 4 years, draining resources and fracturing loyalties across the empire. Although Kublai eventually emerged victorious in 1264, his victory came at a significant cost. The Mongol Empire, once a unified force, was now divided into separate, semi-autonomous khanates. This division formalized the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire into 4 main khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia. Each khanate operated independently, with its own ruler, governance structure, and often distinct cultural influences. While they all recognized the nominal authority of the Great Khan, this allegiance was more symbolic than practical, as each khanate pursued its own interests and priorities. The unity that had once defined the Mongol Empire was now a memory, replaced by a decentralized structure that reflected the diversity and complexity of the lands they ruled. With his position secured, Kublai focused his efforts on consolidating control over China, where he aimed to integrate Mongol rule with Chinese traditions. He recognized that governing China required more than military dominance. It demanded a deep understanding of Chinese governance, culture, and bureaucracy. In 1271, Kublai officially declared the establishment of the Yuan dynasty, marking the first time a non-Chinese ruler would fully integrate himself into the Chinese imperial system. This was more than a political move. It was a statement of intent, signifying his commitment to ruling China not as an outsider but as an emperor. Kublai adopted Chinese bureaucratic practices, building on centuries of Confucian administration to govern his new empire. He appointed Chinese officials to key positions, implemented Confucian principles in governance, and maintained the traditional civil service examination system, albeit with some modifications to ensure Mongol oversight. His approach was pragmatic. He understood that by respecting and incorporating Chinese administrative systems, he could gain the support of the scholar official class, who wielded significant influence over the Chinese population. By aligning himself with these scholars and officials, Kublai sought to legitimize his rule, blending Mongol authority with Chinese tradition to create a hybrid governance model. The Yuan dynasty under Kublai also saw the flourishing of trade and cultural exchange, as Kublai encouraged contact between East and West. The Mongol Empire's control over the Silk Road facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas, bringing Chinese technologies such as printing, paper currency, and gunpowder to Europe and the Islamic world. Kublai's capital, Khan Balik, modern-day Beijing, became a cosmopolitan center where merchants, diplomats, and scholars from across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe gathered, exchanging ideas and knowledge. Kublai's court included a diverse array of advisors and officials, from Persian astronomers and Arab engineers to Venetian travelers like Marco Polo, whose accounts would later captivate European audiences and deepen interest in the East. Despite his success in establishing the Yuan dynasty, Kublai faced significant challenges in his attempts to fully integrate Mongol rule within China. Many Mongols resented his adoption of Chinese customs, fearing that the sedentary lifestyle and bureaucratic governance would erode their traditional nomadic values. This tension between the Mongol elite and the Chinese bureaucracy was a persistent source of friction, as Kublai tried to balance the expectations of his Mongol supporters with the demands of ruling a sophisticated, highly organized society. His policies aimed to favor the Mongols in certain ways, such as granting them tax exemptions and high-ranking positions in the military, yet he also sought to create a stable administration that could govern the vast Chinese population effectively. Kublai's efforts to adopt Chinese governance practices also faced resistance from within China itself. Many Chinese officials viewed the Mongols as foreign invaders, and despite Kublai's efforts to present himself as a legitimate ruler, resentment lingered among the populace. The Yuan dynasty faced ongoing issues with rebellions and civil unrest, reflecting the difficulty of achieving true integration in such a culturally complex society. Kublai's rule was marked by a series of military campaigns aimed at quelling rebellions in southern China and consolidating his authority over the entire region. These campaigns were costly and further strained the empire's resources, highlighting the challenges inherent in ruling such a vast and culturally diverse territory. The division of the Mongol Empire into Khanates and the establishment of the Yuan dynasty were transformative events that reshaped the Mongol legacy. Kublai's vision for China, though ambitious, ultimately marked a departure from the traditional Mongol focus on expansion and nomadic conquest. His decision to adopt a sedentary, bureaucratic model reflected a broader shift in Mongol identity, one that would influence the trajectory of the empire in the years to come. The Yuan dynasty stood as a testament to Kublai's ability to adapt and integrate, but it also symbolized the fragmentation of Mongol unity, a split that would make it increasingly difficult for future rulers to maintain the cohesion that had once defined the Mongol Empire. In many ways, Kublai's reign represented both the peak of Mongol influence and the beginning of its decline. By establishing the Yuan dynasty, he brought Mongol rule to the heart of Chinese civilization, creating a unique cultural synthesis that would impact China long after his death. Yet the division of the empire into separate khanates signaled the end of the unified Mongol state that Genghis Khan had envisioned. The competing interests and regional identities of the khanates would only deepen over time, eventually leading to the decline of Mongol power and the disintegration of the empire into distinct realms. Kublai's legacy, therefore, is a complex one, marked by both visionary achievements and the unavoidable realities of ruling an empire as diverse and expansive as the Mongol Empire. Kublai Khan's rule was transformative, not only in terms of political structure, but also in the economic and cultural landscape of China. As the founder of the Yuan dynasty, Kublai sought to build an empire that was economically powerful and culturally vibrant, one that would be recognized and respected across the world. Through innovative economic policies and an openness to foreign influences, Kublai elevated China's standing as a center of trade and culture, turning Beijing into one of the most cosmopolitan cities of the medieval world. One of Kublai's most impactful economic policies was his promotion of paper currency, an innovation that was relatively unique to China at the time. While paper money had existed during the Song dynasty, Kublai expanded its use, recognizing its potential to simplify transactions and facilitate trade across vast distances. Under his reign, the Yuan government began to issue a standardized form of paper currency known as Cao, which was accepted throughout the empire. This currency was backed by the power of the state, which guaranteed its value and provided strict oversight to prevent counterfeiting. The widespread use of paper currency simplified commerce within China, enabling merchants to conduct business without the need for heavy coins or cumbersome barter transactions, and it unified the diverse regional economies under a single economic system. Kublai's embrace of paper currency was part of his broader vision to integrate and streamline the Yuan economy. He understood that a strong economy was essential for maintaining stability and supporting his ambitions as emperor. The use of paper currency allowed for a more efficient taxation system, as it was easier to collect and redistribute wealth. It also facilitated large-scale infrastructure projects, as the state could fund construction and maintenance more effectively. Kublai invested heavily in improving roads, building canals and enhancing the Grand Canal, which connected northern and southern China and allowed goods to flow seamlessly between regions. This infrastructure strengthened internal trade and connected distant parts of the empire, fostering economic cohesion across Yuan China. Beyond economic policies, Kublai was a visionary in his approach to trade. He actively encouraged foreign merchants to visit and do business within the Yuan Empire, establishing an environment of openness that drew traders and explorers from across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. His court welcomed merchants from Persia, India, and Southeast Asia, each bringing their own goods, customs, and knowledge. Kublai's favorable policies for merchants included tax exemptions, protections for foreign traders, and safe passage across Mongol-controlled trade routes. These policies were designed to make China an attractive destination for global commerce, placing it at the heart of the Silk Road network. Kublai's court became a magnet for ambitious travelers and explorers, none more famous than the Venetian merchant Marco Polo. Polo's accounts of his time at Kublai's court captured the imaginations of readers across Europe, painting a picture of a magnificent and wealthy empire unlike any they had known. Polo's writings described the grandeur of Kublai's court, the richness of Chinese culture, and the marvels of Chinese technology and innovations, such as gunpowder printing and the postal system. Through Polo's accounts, Europe was introduced to the splendors of Yuan China, sparking interest and intrigue that would eventually inspire further exploration and exchanges between East and West. Under Kublai's reign, Beijing, then known as Dadu, was transformed into a cultural and economic center that reflected the diversity of the Yuan dynasty itself. The city was a place of cultural synthesis, where traditions from across the empire converged and mingled. Kublai's administration actively integrated Chinese bureaucratic practices with Mongol military traditions, creating a unique governance model that blended Chinese, Mongol, Persian, and Islamic administrative influences. This fusion of cultures was evident in architecture, where Buddhist, Taoist, Confucian, and Mongol symbols appeared side by side, reflecting the multiplicity of beliefs tolerated and even encouraged under Kublai's rule. Kublai's openness to cultural exchange extended to the arts, sciences, and philosophy. Scholars, astronomers, engineers, and artists from across the empire and beyond were invited to the Yuan court, contributing their expertise and creating an intellectual environment where innovation thrived. Persian astronomers helped develop more accurate calendars. Islamic mathematicians introduced new concepts in geometry and algebra, and Chinese engineers advanced techniques in hydraulic engineering. This fusion of knowledge led to technological advancements that would have lasting impacts on China and beyond, solidifying Yuan China as a center of scientific progress and intellectual exchange. Religious tolerance was another hallmark of Kublai's rule, reflecting his understanding of the cultural diversity within his empire. Although a Buddhist himself, Kublai allowed freedom of worship, supporting Buddhist, Taoist, Confucian, Christian, and Islamic communities alike. Religious leaders from various faiths were welcome at his court, and Kublai often sought their counsel on matters of governance and social harmony. This policy of tolerance was not only a pragmatic approach to ruling a diverse population, but also a symbol of Kublai's vision for a united empire where different beliefs could coexist peacefully. Kublai's economic and cultural policies fostered an environment of prosperity and creativity that defined the Yuan dynasty. Through trade and openness to foreign ideas, Yuan China became a focal point of global exchange, attracting talent and knowledge from across the known world. The fusion of Chinese traditions with Mongol and foreign influences created a rich multicultural society that reflected the complexity and diversity of Kublai's empire. His rule exemplified the potential of an empire that was both grounded in local traditions and open to global connections, a balance that made Yuan China an economic powerhouse and a cultural beacon. While Kublai's policies achieved remarkable success in many areas, they also introduced new challenges. The influx of foreign influences, while enriching, sometimes alienated certain Chinese elites who saw the dominance of foreign merchants and officials as a threat to traditional Chinese society. Kublai's reliance on foreign advisors and his promotion of Mongol and Central Asian officials over native Chinese bureaucrats stirred resentment, leading to tensions that would eventually contribute to the dynasty's decline. Nonetheless, his reign left an enduring legacy, showcasing the benefits of economic innovation, cultural exchange, and tolerance in creating a prosperous and diverse empire. Kublai's vision for China was ambitious and transformative. By promoting trade, supporting paper currency, and welcoming diverse cultures, he laid the foundation for a thriving economy and a dynamic society. Yuan China became a bridge between East and West, a place where ideas, goods, and beliefs converged. Through his policies, Kublai elevated the Yuan dynasty to a position of global prominence, fostering a legacy of cultural synthesis that would shape Chinese society and resonate long after his empire had faded. His reign not only expanded the Mongol influence, but redefined what it meant to rule, proving that the strength of an empire lay not only in its armies, but in its openness, adaptability, and commitment to fostering a vibrant, interconnected world. As Kublai Khan consolidated his power over China and transformed it into a center of trade and culture, he looked to extend the Mongol Empire's reach further eastward and southward. However, his campaigns in Japan and Southeast Asia would reveal the limits of Mongol expansion and mark some of the first major defeats in Mongol history. These challenges underscored the difficulties of projecting power across hostile environments and foreign territories, testing the resilience of the Mongol Empire's military might. One of Kublai's most ambitious goals was to conquer Japan, a strategic island nation that had largely remained untouched by Mongol influence. The conquest of Japan would have secured Mongol dominance across East Asia, establishing control over the region's sea routes and expanding Kublai's empire even further. Kublai initially sought to bring Japan into the Mongol sphere through diplomacy, sending emissaries to demand that the Japanese shogunate submit to his authority. However, the Japanese rejected his demands, and the response Kublai received was one of defiance rather than deference. Unwilling to tolerate this resistance, Kublai decided to launch a military campaign against Japan in 1274. The first invasion force, comprising an estimated 30,000 to 40,000 Mongol, Korean and Chinese soldiers, set sail for Japan in a fleet of hundreds of ships. This campaign introduced Japan to the ferocity and sophistication of Mongol warfare, as Kublai's forces arrived with advanced weaponry, including gunpowder bombs and incendiary devices that the Japanese had not encountered before. The Mongols initially gained ground on the island of Kyushu, overwhelming local Japanese forces with their disciplined formations and superior weaponry. However, just as the Mongols appeared poised to press deeper into Japan, a powerful typhoon swept through the region, devastating their fleet and forcing a hasty retreat. The invasion was ultimately abandoned, with many Mongol ships destroyed and thousands of soldiers lost to the storm. Undeterred, Kublai prepared for a second, even larger invasion in 1281, determined to subjugate Japan and assert Mongol authority. This time he assembled an immense force of approximately 140,000 troops and over 4,000 ships, making it one of the largest amphibious invasions in history. The invasion force was divided into two fleets, one that departed from Korea and another that set sail from southern China, intending to converge on the Japanese coast. However, logistical challenges, communication difficulties, and resistance from the Japanese defenders slowed the Mongol advance. The Japanese, having learned from the previous invasion, fortified their defenses and constructed walls along key coastal areas, preparing themselves for another onslaught. As the Mongol forces struggled to gain a foothold, nature once again intervened. A second typhoon, just as fierce as the first, struck the Mongol fleet off the coast of Kyushu. The storm shattered the Mongol ships, scattering them and wreaking havoc on the invasion force. Thousands of Mongol soldiers drowned or were stranded, and the Japanese defenders took advantage of the chaos to attack any survivors who managed to reach the shore. This second failed invasion marked the end of Kublai's ambitions in Japan. In Japanese history, these typhoons would later be celebrated as kamikaze, or divine wind, believed to have been sent by the gods to protect Japan from foreign invaders. For Kublai, the defeats represented not only a tactical setback, but also the symbolic resilience of Japan against Mongol might. These were the eras of Mongol supremacy, and with Kublai's death came the start of the decline of the Mongol Empire. In his later years, Kublai faced personal tragedies and health issues. The death of his favorite wife, Chabi, in 1281, and his eldest son, Genjin, in 1285, deeply affected him. These losses led him to withdraw from active governance, and he turned to excessive eating and drinking, resulting in obesity and worsening gout. Kublai Khan died on February 18, 1294, at the age of 79. After the death of Kublai Khan, the great Mongol Empire, which had once stretched from the steppes of Mongolia to the shores of the Mediterranean, began to show the strains of its vastness. What had once been held together by the unifying force of the great Khan's authority now began to splinter. The empire, which had thrived under the watchful leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, was no longer a singular force, but was transforming into four powerful but distinct khanates. First, there was the Yuan dynasty in China. Kublai had shaped it as a unique blend of Mongol rule and Chinese governance, and after his death, it continued to operate largely within its own orbit, drawing from the sophisticated bureaucratic traditions of China. Then to the west, the Ilkhanate in Persia rose as a fusion of Mongol and Persian influences, evolving with Persian administration and adopting Islam, which gave it a distinct identity within the Mongol world. Further to the north, the Golden Horde in Russia became its own formidable power, adapting Mongol rule to the complex political landscape of the Slavic territories, where they ruled largely through a system of local princes. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia remained the most traditional, holding to the nomadic customs and laws of the Mongols, while governing vast stretches of the Silk Road and steppes. Each of these khanates was led by descendants of Genghis Khan, yet they operated increasingly as separate states. The allegiance they once owed to the Great Khan became more symbolic than real. Each khanate had its own interests and priorities, and as the decades wore on, the cohesive force that had once propelled Mongol power across continents grew weaker. The fragmentation into these distinct khanates marked the beginning of the Mongol Empire's decline, as the unity that had once fueled unprecedented conquests faded into regionalism and individual dynastic ambitions. The great Mongol world, once bound by a shared vision, had entered an era where its parts would each pursue their own path. The Mongol Empire's challenges were not limited to Japan. Kublai also sought to expand his influence into Southeast Asia, a region of rich resources and strategic importance. He aimed to bring kingdoms like Vietnam, Burma, and Java under Mongol control, envisioning an empire that would extend into the tropical realms of the south. However, the dense jungles, mountainous terrain, and unfamiliar climate of Southeast Asia proved to be formidable obstacles, hindering the movement and effectiveness of Mongol forces. The local kingdoms, well versed in guerrilla warfare and fortified in difficult-to-access territories, mounted fierce resistance, exploiting their knowledge of the terrain to frustrate and exhaust the Mongol invaders. In Vietnam, Kublai encountered one of his most tenacious adversaries, the Dai Viet Kingdom, led by the Trun dynasty. The Vietnamese forces, under the leadership of King Trun Thanh Tong and his successor Trun Nhuan Tong, employed hit-and-run tactics, striking the Mongols in surprise attacks before retreating into the dense jungle. The Mongols, unaccustomed to the harsh climate and guerrilla tactics of their opponents, suffered heavy losses. Despite their superior weaponry and resources, they were unable to secure a decisive victory, and after repeated attempts, Kublai's forces were forced to withdraw, conceding that the tropical environment and resilient Vietnamese forces had bested them. Kublai's attempts to conquer Java in 1293 also ended in failure. The island's ruler, Kertanagara of the Sinkasari Kingdom, initially refused to submit to Mongol authority, prompting Kublai to dispatch a punitive expedition. However, by the time the Mongol fleet arrived, Kertanagara had been overthrown, and the island's political landscape had shifted. The Mongols became entangled in local conflicts and were ultimately forced to withdraw after failing to establish a foothold. The tropical climate, logistical difficulties, and complex political dynamics of Java proved insurmountable, and the expedition ended in retreat. These setbacks in Japan and Southeast Asia marked a turning point for the Mongol Empire, highlighting the limits of its expansion and the challenges of projecting power into distant, hostile environments. Unlike the open plains and temperate regions that Mongol forces were accustomed to, the mountainous, jungle-covered territories of Southeast Asia and the storm-swept seas around Japan presented conditions that negated many of the Mongols' traditional advantages. The Mongol strategy, based on mobility, cavalry, and rapid deployment, proved less effective in these unfamiliar landscapes. The logistical difficulties of sustaining large forces across vast distances also drained resources, diverting attention from other pressing matters within the empire. The failed invasions also had lasting repercussions for Kublai's rule and the Yuan dynasty as a whole. These campaigns were expensive undertakings, straining the Yuan treasury and increasing the tax burden on Chinese subjects to fund the massive fleets and armies required. As Kublai's campaigns faltered, discontent began to simmer within his empire, particularly among the Chinese population, who bore the brunt of the economic pressures caused by his ambitious military ventures. These costly failures, combined with rising dissatisfaction at home, weakened the Yuan dynasty and set the stage for internal unrest in the years that followed. Despite his setbacks, Kublai's attempts to conquer Japan and Southeast Asia underscored his determination to expand Mongol influence and maintain the spirit of conquest that had driven the empire's founders. His campaigns marked the outer limits of Mongol expansion, establishing boundaries that would define the Mongol Empire's territorial reach. Though he did not succeed in subjugating these regions, Kublai's efforts left a profound impact on both his empire and the cultures he sought to conquer, demonstrating the immense ambition of the Mongols and the resilience of those who resisted. In the end, the kamikaze typhoons and the impenetrable jungles of Southeast Asia became symbols of the natural and human limits to Mongol power. These challenges illustrated that even the mightiest empire of the age could not overcome all obstacles, particularly when faced with forces beyond its control. Kublai's failed campaigns served as a reminder of the complexities of empire, where ambition and resourcefulness must contend with the realities of geography, climate, and the indomitable will of those defending their homelands. As the Mongol Empire fractured, another devastating force struck, one that no army or ruler could stop: the Black Death. This deadly plague, sweeping across continents, found its way along the very trade routes that had flourished under Mongol protection. These routes, once the lifelines of commerce, culture, and communication between East and West, became the conduits for an invisible enemy that spared no one in its path. The Black Death spread relentlessly along the Silk Road, reaching the bustling cities, trading posts, and villages that had grown under the stability the Mongols had enforced. Populations were decimated from China to Persia, through the Middle East, and into Europe. Major urban centres, once filled with merchants, scholars, and artisans, fell silent as the death toll climbed. In many places, entire towns were emptied, and the economic backbone of the Mongol world was severely weakened. For the already divided empire, the impact was catastrophic. The trade networks that once enriched each khanate with a steady flow of goods and resources collapsed as fear of contagion halted travel, and communities isolated themselves in desperation to avoid the plague. Labour shortages devastated agriculture, trade faltered, and the loss of revenue further strained the administration of each khanate. The Mongol Empire's disintegration accelerated as resources dwindled, and regional leaders, weakened by the plague, turned inward to manage local crises rather than maintaining any sense of a unified empire. In the end, the Black Death was both a human and an economic tragedy for the Mongols. It dealt a final, unstoppable blow to the empire's cohesion, hastening the decline of a once mighty world power. The Silk Road, which the Mongols had secured as their proud legacy of connected civilizations, became the unwitting pathway to the empire's undoing. The Mongol world, built on the movement of people and goods, was now being undone by an unstoppable force moving through those same channels, leaving behind a world forever changed. Before I end, I would just like to mention their combat ability, how brutal, tactical, and strategic the Mongols were. I could talk about their warfare for hours, and if you would like me to do it, comment below. The Mongols didn't simply fight wars, they redefined the art of combat, introducing tactics and strategies that sent shockwaves through empires and reshaped warfare for centuries to come. Picture the scene. Vast open plains, dust rising as thousands of Mongol horsemen thundered across the landscape, their presence alone enough to unnerve even the most battle-hardened forces. Their approach wasn't just physical but psychological, and their strategies combined speed, precision, and brutal efficiency to create a formidable war machine. At the heart of this machine was the Mongol warrior's reliance on his horse, which was not merely a mount but an extension of himself. Mongol riders each managed a string of horses, rotating between mounts to conserve energy and maximize endurance. These steppe horses, tough and resilient, could cross deserts and mountains with ease, allowing the Mongols to cover up to 80 miles in a day, a pace that stunned their opponents, who often heard only rumors of Mongol movements before the full force of the horde descended upon them. This wasn't just fast cavalry, it was an army that moved like a phantom, striking with sudden, devastating precision. Their strikes were rarely straightforward, and their attacks often began with what looked like chaos. To opponents, it seemed as if the Mongols were breaking into disarray, only to reform moments later into a coordinated assault. Their composite bows, crafted from wood, horn, and sinew, were compact yet powerful, capable of firing arrows accurately up to 500 yards. Each Mongol warrior was trained from youth to master this bow on horseback, loosing volleys of arrows while galloping at full speed. They developed the art of the Parthian shot, an ability to shoot backwards over the shoulder while riding away from the enemy, allowing them to strike even in retreat. It was this combination of relentless mobility and the lethality of their archers that turned Mongol skirmishes into a deadly dance, one that baited, weakened, and exhausted their foes long before a decisive blow was ever struck. One of the Mongols' most feared maneuvers was the feigned retreat. Few tactics unnerved their enemies more than this calculated trickery. They would simulate defeat, breaking ranks and fleeing, tempting their opponents to chase them down in a moment of perceived triumph. But as soon as the enemy was lured into an exposed position, the Mongols would wheel around in perfect formation, springing the trap. This maneuver was devastatingly effective, leaving countless armies shattered by their own misplaced confidence. And when the time came for a final confrontation, the Mongols often encircled their prey, forming a tulugma or hunting circle, in which no escape was possible. In these moments, the Mongols' control over the battlefield was total, an eerie silence descending before the swift, brutal end. But the Mongols' genius lay not just in physical tactics. They wielded fear as a weapon, as effectively as they did their bows. Genghis Khan and his successors understood the psychological power of terror, and they wielded it ruthlessly. Stories of Mongol brutality, cities razed to the ground, entire populations massacred, spread like wildfire across Asia and Europe. When the Mongols approached, emissaries would be sent ahead, demanding surrender and promising mercy only to those who submitted. Those who refused were given no quarter, their lands left as stark warnings to others. This tactic was devastatingly effective. Entire cities would often surrender without a fight, terrified of the fate they knew awaited those who resisted. In their conquests, the Mongols encountered cities fortified by walls and defenses they had not seen before. Yet they quickly adapted, integrating siege warfare into their already extensive arsenal of tactics. Captured engineers from China and Persia introduced them to advanced siege technology, and soon Mongol forces were employing battering rams, siege towers, and catapults with devastating skill. No longer limited to open-field battles, the Mongols became masters of city assaults as well, leaving few places safe from their reach. The Mongols were also brutal pragmatists. In battle, they had no qualms about using captives as shields or forcing them to dig trenches and operate siege equipment, sparing their own forces from the front lines. This ruthless efficiency minimized Mongol casualties, reinforced their reputation for remorselessness, and often left the survivors so shaken that further resistance felt futile. Together, these tactics, unmatched mobility, the psychological impact of fear, battlefield deception, superior archery, and mastery of siege warfare, crafted a force that was as terrifying as it was unstoppable. The Mongols didn't merely defeat their enemies, they dismantled their will to resist, one devastating maneuver at a time. Their approach to warfare was unlike anything the world had seen, a symphony of strategy and savagery that would be studied, emulated, and feared long after the Mongol Empire itself had faded. The echoes of their tactics resonated through the centuries, changing not just the course of battles, but the nature of warfare itself. The invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire stands as one of the most personal and vengeful of Genghis Khan's campaigns. It all began with a seemingly minor diplomatic incident that quickly escalated into all-out war. Genghis Khan had sent envoys to the Khwarezmian Sultan, Muhammad II, hoping to establish peaceful trade relations. But when those envoys were killed on Muhammad's orders, Genghis took it not just as an insult, but as an unforgivable betrayal. What followed was not simply a punitive raid, but a full-scale, relentless assault on the entire Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols divided their forces into small, highly mobile units, each tasked with attacking different cities across a vast region. Using unconventional routes, they navigated through deserts and mountain passes that the Khwarezmian defenders had believed impassable. No place was safe, no stronghold impenetrable. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara were encircled, overwhelmed and obliterated. At Samarkand, the Mongols slaughtered its defenders, leaving only a handful of artisans alive. Genghis Khan reportedly stood in Bukhara and declared to its terrified residents that he was the punishment of God, sent upon them for their sins. It was a calculated use of terror, and word of his brutality spread swiftly, leading many cities to surrender rather than risk such wrath. A few decades later, the Mongols turned their attention westward, targeting Europe in a campaign that showcased the breadth of their military sophistication. The battles of Liegnitz and Mohi, both in April 1241, demonstrated the Mongols' devastating effectiveness in large-scale warfare against well-equipped and organized European armies. At Liegnitz, a coalition of Polish, German, and Moravian forces gathered to halt the Mongol advance. Led by the formidable generals Subutai and Batu Khan, the Mongols employed their classic feigned retreat, luring the European knights into disarray. As the Europeans charged, the Mongols wheeled around, surrounding and crushing the coalition army with precision. The battle served as a brutal warning to other European kingdoms, who saw that even their most seasoned knights were no match for Mongol strategy. Just days later, the Mongols delivered a final blow at the Battle of Mohi. Near the Sajo River, the Hungarian forces believed they had blocked the Mongols' path. But under the cover of night, Subutai's forces crossed the river undetected and attacked from multiple directions in a surprise dawn assault. The Hungarian army was shattered, losing thousands in one of the most significant Mongol victories in Europe. These battles showcased the Mongols' skill at coordinated multi-front assaults, leaving Europe vulnerable and shaken. The Mongol campaign against the Islamic world reached its apex with the siege of Baghdad in 1258, a campaign led by Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. Baghdad, the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate, held immense symbolic and strategic significance. Hulagu knew this and employed psychological tactics that crippled the city before the first arrow was even fired. Aligning with local tribes and cutting off food supplies, the Mongols tightened their grip around Baghdad, undermining the morale and resources of the city's defenders. The psychological warfare was relentless. When the city finally fell, the Mongols unleashed one of the most devastating massacres in history. Thousands were slaughtered, libraries and mosques burned, and the very heart of the Islamic world was gutted. With Baghdad's fall came the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, a centuries-old center of Islamic power, learning, and culture. The Mongols had not only won a military victory, they had reshaped the political and religious landscape of the Middle East. These campaigns against Khwarezm, Europe, and Baghdad were not isolated battles. They were systematic demonstrations of the Mongols' strategic brilliance and unyielding ferocity. Each campaign reflected a calculated mixture of psychological intimidation, masterful logistics, and ruthless follow-through. Through these battles, the Mongols showed that they were not just conquerors, but masters of warfare, who understood that the power of an empire lay not only in the sword, but in the fear it could inspire and the order it could enforce across lands once thought untouchable. As for the final note, the story of the Mongol Empire is one of extraordinary ambition, a testament to what disciplined organization, military innovation, and adaptive governance can achieve. Rising from the vast, windswept steppes, the Mongols carved an empire that reshaped Eurasia, reaching into lands previously unconnected and setting the stage for a global exchange of ideas, goods, and technologies. Their campaigns were ruthless, their methods unconventional, and their reach seemingly boundless, instilling both fear and respect across continents. But their legacy is more than conquest alone. It's a legacy of contrasts, of brutality tempered by tolerance, of calculated fear balanced with practical governance, and of unifying ambition shadowed by eventual fragmentation. The Mongols left a mark on history that continues to resonate to this day. They did not impose a single culture, but instead connected worlds, facilitating the spread of knowledge, craftsmanship, and customs in a way that would shape the future. The empire they built showed that power lay not only in the sword, but in the wisdom of allowing diversity to thrive under one rule. Their strategies, innovations, and policies echo through time, influencing the empires and states that followed, leaving behind a complex legacy as one of history's most formidable and transformative powers. The Mongol Empire remains a vivid reminder of the heights that can be achieved when ambition meets discipline, and the profound impact one empire can have on the world.